Hey guys, welcome back. It's late again, isn't it? That quiet kind of late when even your thoughts start to whisper. The world outside has gone soft around the edges, and the clock, well, it's still ticking, but it doesn't really matter anymore. Time loses its bite after midnight. You've been scrolling, maybe pacing, waiting for something gentle enough to hush the day out of your head. So here you are, half awake, half dreaming, searching for a story that doesn't need to be exciting. Just steady, calm, familiar. So let's drift a little. Let's go to a place that existed before stories were stories, before beginnings were declared, back when the universe was still unsure if it wanted to exist at all. Imagine it. No sound, no light, no shape, just a kind of heavy stillness. Like the air before a storm that never quite arrives. Not emptiness, not fullness either. Something in between. The first drowsy breath of everything. It wasn't dark the way you think of dark. It was the kind of darkness that feels soft on your eyelids. The kind that makes you wonder if maybe you've already fallen asleep. Inside it, something stirred, not fast, not loud. Just a ripple like the thought of movement. Maybe the universe wasn't born. Maybe it just remembered that it could be. At first there was nothing to measure, so no one could say when it began. It was like waiting for water to decide it's a wave. Time wasn't counting yet. It was just humming quietly. A long note held somewhere beneath reality's surface. If you could have floated there, you'd feel it. The faintest pulse under your palms. As though the fabric of everything was breathing very, very slowly. In, out, a rhythm older than thought. That pulse became pattern. Pattern became change. And change, well, that's how everything starts. Light didn't burst forth. It sighed awake. A pale shimmer spread across the quiet. Not to chase away the dark, but to keep it company. The two twined together, testing the idea of being opposites and finding comfort in the balance. There was no sky yet, no sea, no earth. Just endless gradients of maybe. Cool grays that leaned toward blue when they got lonely. Warm silvers that leaned toward gold when they dreamed. Colors weren't named. They were feelings that forgot what shape to take. And in those colors, movement began to loop. Tiny curls of brightness folded into calm shadows, each one learning to repeat itself a little more neatly, until repetition itself became a kind of heartbeat. That heartbeat, that quiet insistence, is still echoing right now inside your chest. You don't hear it because you're made of it. The rhythm that started the world is the same rhythm that rocks you toward sleep. Every inhale you take is a distant memory of the universe's first exhale. Every sigh you let go is the echo of creation deciding it's tired again. Nothing rushed. There was nowhere to go, no reason to arrive. And still existence stretched itself a little further, just to see what might happen next. The dark shifted. The faint glow followed. Together they rolled into one another like tides that hadn't learned the word ocean yet. The in-between grew thicker, heavier, almost touchable. And from that thickness the idea of space uncurled. The first distance, the first here and there. If that sounds abstract, that's fine. It was abstract back then too. The world wasn't ready to be understood. It only wanted to be felt. Everything trembled softly like a thought on the edge of forming a sentence. Every tremble left a trace. Every trace became a line. Lines folded into each other and the slow geometry of being began. And you know it wasn't perfect. Things wobbled. Edges blurred. But perfection was never the point. The point was persistence. That sleepy determination to keep existing just a little longer. Maybe that's why sleep feels so ancient. Because when you close your eyes, you're rehearsing the same gesture the universe made the night it decided to dream itself real. So, Tonight, while your thoughts flicker and fade, try to imagine that first quiet. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of possibility. The kind that holds its breath and says, let's see what happens if I don't disappear yet. And as you picture that, notice how your own breathing begins to match it. Slower, steadier, softer. You are syncing with something billions of years old, something that never needed a name. The world didn't rush into being. It drifted into focus like a picture slowly clearing on fogged glass. And maybe that's the secret rhythm we all still carry. Not the heartbeat of action, but the hum of patience. Because everything you've ever touched, everything that's ever existed came from that same hesitation. That moment before a yawn turns into a breath, before light decides to stay. So let yourself hover there, right in that sweet spot between almost awake and almost gone. The place where thoughts melt into shapes and shapes dissolve into warmth. That's where it all began, and that's where rest waits for you now. The night outside your window isn't empty. It's full of that same gentle uncertainty, the quiet curiosity of existence wondering what it will dream next. Let it. Let the darkness breathe around you. Let the air hum softly in your ears. And if your mind still wants to wander, tell it there's nowhere left to go. You've already arrived back at the beginning. The quiet had been breathing for a long time now. Long enough that it started to wonder whether breathing was all there was. Each slow exhale folded back into itself, curling like mist that doesn't want to leave the lake. And then the quiet began to change. Not suddenly, not dramatically. Just the way dreams change when you stop noticing you're dreaming. Soft waves of pale motion drifted through the stillness, and the stillness didn't push them away. It simply made room. Those waves didn't know what they were. They didn't want to be anything yet. They only wanted to last, to see if something could exist for longer than a heartbeat. And the longer they lasted, the more the space around them began to hum. You wouldn't have called it sound. It was too slow for that. It was like the memory of sound. Echoes from a song no one had sung. A gentle vibration that said, I am here but just barely. That barely became everything. Because once you exist, even for a blink, you can't quite stop. The universe, still half asleep, rolled over in its cosmic bed and muttered, maybe just a little more. And that little more stretched across forever. If you were floating there, you wouldn't have seen shapes. Not yet. Just drifting streaks of half-light sliding across a surface that wasn't a surface. Like the underside of clouds reflected in water that doesn't know it's water. Every ripple left a trace, and every trace whispered, do that again. Repetition became rhythm. Rhythm became comfort, and comfort, that was the first law of existence. Things stayed where they felt comfortable. That's how patterns began. That's how direction appeared. That's how the idea of here separated itself from there. Maybe that's all the universe ever wanted, a sense of where it stood. And while it stretched and shimmered, the soft light began to notice itself. It bent gently, curving like a sigh, pooling in invisible valleys that didn't yet have ground. Each fold of light became thicker, warmer, like thought turning into touch. The air, if you could call it air, carried a scent you'd never be able to describe. It wasn't flowers or smoke or sea. It was the smell of beginning, fresh, uncertain, slightly electric. You could almost taste it, cool on the tongue, like the first sip of rain after years of drought. And in that taste, the world began to settle. Not solidify, not yet, just decide to stay a while. The glow stretched thinner in some places, darker in others, and the contrast made everything feel a little less endless, a little more real. The first horizon appeared, a soft seam between the shimmer and the hush. It wasn't a line you could draw, just a feeling that one side was beginning to notice the other. That feeling, that tiny awareness, was enough to start the slow birth of direction. Up began to mean something. Down followed out of politeness. Everything else adjusted. The light leaned toward one side and the dark leaned back. They weren't fighting, just practicing balance. That balance became the first rhythm of time. Not the ticking kind you wear on your wrist, but the breathing kind you carry in your chest. It's still the same rhythm you follow when you sleep. The pulse that tells your body you can rest because the universe has done this before. Everything that exists now, every stone, every breeze, every heartbeat is just a repetition of that early pattern. Existence humming to itself, afraid that if it stops, the song will be forgotten, but it won't, it can't. The memory of that first hum lives in everything that drifts, everything that lingers a little longer than it should. Even the night sky you see now, full of stars that aren't quite where they appear, is part of that same slow rehearsal of being. Each shimmer, each glint, a sleepy echo of the first flicker of maybe. And if you ever stare up long enough for your eyes to blur, you'll notice something strange. The stars seem to breathe. Their light swells and softens just like the quiet at the start of everything. It's not your eyes, Johnny. It's the rhythm remembering itself. Somewhere deep in the dark, the world still hums that same melody, and you, lying there half awake, are part of its chorus. You don't need to understand it. You just need to listen. Not with your ears, but with that quiet place behind your thoughts where everything you've ever loved or feared or dreamed melts into calm. That's the same place the universe came from. Not chaos, not order. Just calm. A calm that wanted to see itself move. A calm that learned how to shimmer. A calm that somehow became you, so breathe slowly. Let your breath match that ancient pulse. Feel how the air moves through you like it's been doing this forever. Because it has, the world isn't outside you. It's repeating itself inside you. Every blink is a sunrise. Every sigh is a tide pulling away. Every heartbeat is the sound of creation remembering it still exists. And when you finally drift off, not in a rush, not on purpose, you're not leaving the world. You're returning to that first quiet. You're going home to the hum that made you so go slowly. The light will wait. The dark will hold your place. And the universe will keep humming, soft and patient, until you wake again to find it still here, still half asleep, still dreaming you into being. The dark was still breathing. Not loud enough to notice, just that slow rhythm you feel in the space between seconds. Every pulse spread a little warmth, a reminder that silence isn't nothing. It's just sound resting. And somewhere inside that rest, something began to glow. Not suddenly, not like a sunrise you could point to, but more like warmth remembering how to move. It started small, a faint shimmer curling around the edges of stillness, as if the night were tracing itself with a finger made of light. The glow didn't have a name. It didn't even know it was light. It only knew it was different from dark, and for now that was enough. It stretched, then hesitated, then stretched again, like someone testing whether they're really awake. Every movement left a trail, and the trails began to hum back. Not words, not music, just a low murmur like fabric sliding across skin. That murmur rippled outward, and the world, still half-formed, sighed with relief. Because at last something had direction. The light didn't chase the dark. It wandered through it, curious and unafraid. Sometimes it dimmed so low you couldn't tell if it was gone. Other times it brightened just enough to make the shadows curious about their own shapes. You could have floated there forever and never seen a single edge, only gradients breathing in and out, each one wondering whether to stay or fade. The glow thickened. It began to fold itself into soft layers, like sheets being pulled up over a sleeping body. Where it folded, warmth pooled. Where it pooled, color began to whisper. At first it was only gray, the color of maybe. Then hints of gold drifted in, thin as the dust that dances when you move a curtain. The gold didn't shine. It pulsed, slow and patient, like the first heartbeat of a dream that doesn't know it's dreaming. If you had been there, you might have felt that warmth on your skin. It wouldn't have burned. It would have reminded you of being remembered, because that's what the first light was, a memory trying to exist again. The dark didn't fight it. It simply leaned aside like a blanket slipping down to let someone breathe. And in that narrow space between dark and glow, the first shadow was born, not as absence, but as balance. The shadow followed the glow everywhere it went, not out of need, but out of love. Together they painted the first horizon, soft as breath, wide as forever. The horizon wasn't a line. It was a sigh stretched thin, a promise that soon there would be above and below, morning and not morning, light that would learn to linger. The glow drifted upward, though up didn't mean much yet, and began to gather itself. It thickened into veils, folded into streams, curled like smoke that forgot where it came from. Every curl left a trace, and each trace glimmered faintly before melting back into the quiet. And from those tiny glimmers, time began to breathe a little faster. Not rushing, just finding its rhythm, the way your heartbeat steadies after a long stretch of stillness. The glow became patterns. Patterns became waves. Waves learned repetition. Repetition learned comfort. And in that comfort, the first softness of morning was born. Though there was no morning yet, only the feeling that something gentle was on its way. It might have lasted a moment or 1,000 eternities, but in that endless blur, light learned how to linger. It leaned over itself, folded deeper, and in those folds color bloomed. Blue appeared first. Not the blue of sky or ocean, but the blue of exhale, cool and calm. Then amber followed, like sleep caught in a drop of honey. The colors touched and retreated, unsure whether to blend or stay apart. They had no rules yet, only curiosity. They learned the art of being almost bright, almost clear, almost real. And that almost was beautiful. If you closed your eyes now, you could still feel it. That soft uncertainty between nothing and something. It's the same pause your mind takes right before you fall asleep, when thought turns into image and image melts into quiet. That's what the first light was, a pause that refused to end. It didn't want to be day. It didn't want to be night. It only wanted to exist in the hush between them, where everything is allowed to rest without disappearing. And maybe that's why dawn still feels sacred. Not because it begins the day, but because it remembers what it felt like to become. The glow stretched one last time, a long, lazy reach across forever, and the dark, grateful for the company, settled beside it. Together they made the first color of peace. It didn't have a name. It didn't need one. It just was. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it now. That low hum hiding inside every sunrise. That slow rhythm reminding you that being here at all is already enough. So close your eyes, Janny. Let the first light settle behind them. Let it warm the dark parts softly, the way the universe once warmed its own shadow. You are made of that glow. You are the light that forgot its name, still wandering gently through the quiet, still curious enough to exist, still calm enough to rest. So breathe. Let the glow drift through you. The dark will keep the rhythm. The light will do the dreaming. And you just float, half awake, half asleep, right where it all began. The light and the dark were no longer strangers. They had stopped trying to be different things. Now they simply existed. Two halves of one long breath, rising and falling, touching without leaving a mark. Between them, silence began to thicken. Not the empty kind, but the kind that hums softly, like the sound you feel when you press your ear against your own heartbeat. The silence had been there since the beginning, but now it wanted to move. It stretched, slow and weightless, spilling through the folds of light, curling into the dips of darkness. Everywhere it went, it gathered softness, collecting the smallest echoes of what might one day become sound. The silence didn't speak. It sculpted. At first, the shapes were simple. Gentle arcs, smooth curves, ripples that began and ended in the same place. Each one lasted just long enough to be noticed, then melted back into the hush. The first form that stayed was nothing more than a curve that forgot how to close. It floated there, a crescent of quiet, cradling warmth on one side and coolness on the other. The curve began to gather dust. Not the kind you sweep away, but starlit dust. Fine, slow-moving, each grain holding a shimmer of something almost alive. The dust drifted lazily, drawn to the curve's quiet gravity. It swirled in circles, a slow dance without a song, and where it touched the curve, it stayed. The silence deepened around it, as if holding its breath. The light leaned closer, curious. The dark leaned back, patient, and in that stillness form began to bloom. Not a world yet, just the thought of one. A soft roundness, a hollow sigh gathering weight. If you could have seen it then, you wouldn't have called it a planet. You'd have called it a dream that didn't want to end. The silence shaped it slowly, like someone tracing circles in sleep. Each rotation smoothed the edges, each pause made it heavier, and as it turned, the faintest hum began to echo within it. A heartbeat made of nothing but rhythm. The light brushed across its surface, and the dark followed close behind. Where the light touched, warmth gathered. Where the dark lingered, calm took root. And so, without plan or reason, the first balance began to grow. Not perfection, just presence. The silence folded itself around the new form, wrapping it like a blanket. Inside, warmth began to settle, pooling in certain places, spilling in others. And those little differences and those quiet mistakes became the first textures. Some places stayed smooth. Others began to ripple as if the silence were whispering too softly to stay still. You could almost hear it. A low murmur beneath the hush, like something humming to itself while dreaming. The light, still curious, started weaving through those ripples. Each pass left a faint shimmer, a soft memory of movement. And slowly patterns began to appear, swirls and waves, valleys that leaned into shadows, ridges that caught the faintest glow. It wasn't design. It was drift. Every rise and dip happened by accident. But the silence loved them anyway. The world was still formless, yet it felt alive. Because silence had finally found a way to listen to itself. The light lingered a while longer, then dimmed, just enough to let the dark come closer. And where the two met again, something new began. The faintest shimmer of reflection. The light didn't recognize it at first. It thought it was seeing another glow. But no, it was seeing itself. And that realization was the birth of the first surface, smooth, quiet, barely there, but enough to hold the echo of what touched it. The dark rested against it, content, and together they began to breathe in rhythm again. Each breath softened the edges of the world. Each exhale spread calm across its surface. The silence smiled, if silence could smile, and went on shaping softly. There was no rush, no need for completion. Everything was still learning what enough meant, and maybe that's what balance really was, not symmetry, but rest. The world turned slowly under their quiet care. The glow of light became a memory of day. The hush of dark became a promise of night. And between them the silence stretched itself thin, resting in the spaces where nothing had to happen. If you were there, floating somewhere above that still forming world, you would have felt the peace of it. No sound, no movement, just the pulse of something learning how to exist. Every now and then, the silence would hum softly again and the shape below would respond, as if dreaming back in that dream, that endless, wordless exchange when was the first story ever told. Not spoken, not written, just felt, and that story never ended. It became everything that followed. Every wave, every wind, every breath that fills and leaves you. All of it is the silence remembering its shape. So if you ever feel lost, if the world gets too loud and you can't hear your own thoughts anymore, close your eyes. Breathe slow. Let the quiet stretch back around you. You're not running from sound. You're returning to the shape that made you. The shape of silence. The one that held the first light, the first breath, the first dream of being. You are still part of that. Still turning. Still soft. Still enough. So rest now. Let the hum fade. Let the darkened light fold gently over you. The silence will do the rest. It always does. The world was still. Perfectly still. Too still, maybe. The kind of stillness that only exists right before something remembers how to move. The silence that shaped it had been patient, but even patience begins to hum after a while. Not from restlessness, but from curiosity. That hum rose again, the same low vibration that once stirred the first glow, but this time, it didn't fade. It lingered, shivering softly through the folds of light and dark, finding its way into the spaces that silence had left hollow. Those hollows were not mistakes. They were pauses, places left open so the world could breathe when it was ready. And now, it was ready. The hum gathered itself, rolling gently through the quiet. It didn't rush. It didn't push. It only suggested, like a whisper wondering if anyone's listening. The light leaned forward and the dark pulled back. Just a little. And that tiny distance between them became movement. You couldn't see it, not yet. It was too soft for eyes that hadn't been born. But you could feel it. That slow stir in the air, the hush turning over in its sleep. The silence had created shape. But this was different. This was life without form, motion without purpose, a wandering sigh testing its own weight. It drifted low at first, sweeping across the world's surface, curling in small, invisible loops. Each loop made another, and soon the air was full of tiny spirals, circles chasing themselves into being. They touched the folds and ripples the silence had left behind, and the world began to respond. The smooth places shivered, the rough places hummed. The shallow dips deepened as the air traced their edges, and in that tracing, patterns began to remember themselves. The air had learned to move, and with that movement, the silence changed. It wasn't gone. It just stepped back a little, letting the new rhythm breathe. The hum became a sigh. The sigh became a swirl. The swirl stretched and spread, dancing with the light, tangling with the dark, creating shadows that moved without needing anything to cast them. The world was still half asleep, but it was dreaming of motion now. Every drift of air carried a faint shimmer, not light, not sound, but something that felt like intention, as if the air wanted to know what it was like to belong somewhere. It brushed across the surface again, testing its own presence. It gathered warmth in one place, coolness in another, and those differences began to sing quietly. The first breeze was born, not the kind you'd feel on your skin. This one was too soft for that. But it carried a rhythm, and the world listened. The breeze didn't know where to go. It only knew how to circle, how to lift and fall, how to learn by repeating itself. And as it turned, it began to notice something. A sound that wasn't silence, a feeling that wasn't stillness. It was the sound of space making room for itself. The air pressed outward, stretching the edges of the world ever so slightly, and the world exhaled. That exhale, slow, steady, endless one, was the first wind. It moved like thought before language, rolling smooth and constant, pulling shadows into shapes, lifting dust that shimmered faintly in its wake. The dust drifted, and wherever it fell, the world gained texture. Some grains clung to warmth, others fell into cool pockets, and slowly the first contrast began to form, high and low, soft and hard, light and shade. The air noticed this, and for the first time, it played. It swept across the brighter sides and dipped into the darker folds, looping and weaving, turning stillness into rhythm. That rhythm was the beginning of time. Not time you could measure, just time you could feel. A soft pulse, a slow inhale and release. The world was breathing now. It didn't know what breath meant. It just knew it felt right. The silence, watching all this unfold, was proud in its quiet way. It had created stillness, but this was balance finding motion. The first currents grew bolder. They rolled along the surface, sweeping warmth and dust together until they clung in soft mounds. Those mounds began to glow faintly, as if holding memory inside them. And the glow shimmered higher, spreading into thin veils and the first hints of mist. The mist curled upward, weightless, half light, half breath. It rose and folded upon itself, forming a delicate ceiling over the world's silence. And for the first time there was above and below. The breeze drifted between them, turning the air into layers of motion. Every layer hummed at a different tone, a different rhythm, like the chords of a song too ancient to be remembered. And in that song, the world found peace again, not in stillness this time, but in motion that never needed to hurry. Light filtered through the mist, splitting softly into color. Not bright color, not the harshness of day, just a quiet bloom, as if the air itself had learned to blush. Blue seeped in first, not from above, but from calm. Then pale gold, like a secret that's been whispered too many times. And somewhere deep in the folds of mist, a faint shade of silver began to hum. The memory of the silence that started it all. Everything was connected. The world wasn't separate from the air. The air wasn't separate from the light. The light wasn't separate from the dark. They were all just one long sigh, resting and rising and resting again. That sigh still lives in everything. In your breath, in the quiet between thoughts, in the warmth that settles before sleep. You are made of that first air, that same soft hum that learned how to move without needing to go anywhere. So breathe, Janie. Feel the world turning beneath you, slow and patient. You're not standing on it. You're part of it. You're the air learning itself again, the silence remembering how to sing. Let it move through you, slow, circular, endless. No rush, no goal. Just the calm repetition of being. And if you listen close enough, beneath the sound of your own breath, you might still hear it. That first wind, still moving, still soft, still learning to love the shape it made. So rest now. Let the air carry your thoughts the way it carried dust, lightly, gently, without trying to hold them. The silence will return soon, not to end the motion, but to cradle it, the way night cradles the wind, the way sleep cradles a dream that still hums after you've forgotten it. You're safe inside that rhythm. You always have been. So drift. Let the air move for you. Let the dark breathe beside you. Let the light pulse softly beneath your eyelids. Nothing is ending. Nothing ever does. It's all just air learning to move, and again and again and again. The wind had learned to move. Now the world wanted to learn how to flow. For a long time, if time meant anything yet, the air drifted across the quiet surface, folding warmth into cool, pulling light into shade, spreading softness wherever it touched. The silence stayed near, not guiding, not watching, just holding space, letting things remember what it felt like to become. In one of those soft crossings where the air grew tired of rising, the warmth it carried began to gather. Not heavy, just close. Close enough that the space between each shimmer began to hum. That hum thickened slow and low like a sigh being held too long. It sank, curled inward, and began to pool. No one would have called it water yet. It wasn't clear, wasn't wet, wasn't even sure what it wanted to be. But it was patient. And patience is the first ingredient of water. The glow above it softened, and the dark beneath rose to meet it. They pressed together gently, and between them, something gave way. The first drop fell. It didn't fall far. There was nowhere to go, but it moved with purpose. Round, slow, perfect. When it landed, it didn't splash. It sang, not loud, not even sound as we'd know it. Just a small vibration that made everything nearby tremble, as if the world itself had shivered from recognition. The air, curious as ever, leaned closer, rolling softly across that single drop. It carried warmth with it, and the drop quivered. That quiver turned into motion. The drop spread thin, pulled apart, then gathered again in a pulse of becoming, and like a heartbeat recognizing its echo, another drop appeared. Then another, and another. Each one found the others by sound, not sight. They drifted together, drawn by vibration, until they formed a small, trembling pool of light. The pool breathed. Each inhale deepened it. Each exhale widened it. The air began to swirl over it. The dark pressed softly around it, and the silence leaned closer. Not to speak, but to listen. The pool listened too. It listened to the air above, to the shape of the world beneath, to the slow rhythm of existence humming through everything. And as it listened, it learned to move. The first wave was tiny, a whisper of curve that rolled across the surface and vanished. Then another followed, and another. Each wave remembered the one before it, and memory became pattern. Soon the pool wasn't still anymore. It had begun to dance. The dance wasn't graceful, it was discovery. The water moved because it could, because it wanted to see what change felt like. It bent the light around it, pulling gold into blue, silver into gray, turning reflection into motion. Every shimmer that passed across it became another ripple, and every ripple was a question that didn't need an answer. The air sighed through it, picking up flecks of its light, carrying them higher, letting them cool into mist again. Mist and water, and endlessly trading places, never deciding who they wanted to be. And in that repetition, peace was born, because the world wasn't trying to finish itself. It was learning to enjoy its own becoming. The water deepened. The ripples grew longer, slower, their hum reaching into the folds of the land that silence had once sculpted. Those folds filled slowly, each hollow a cradle. Some were shallow, some endless, but all of them waited the same way, quietly, openly. And water, being what it was, could not resist a waiting space. It poured itself into them, stretching, bending, finding every curve, every breath of room. That's how the first valleys were filled. Not with purpose, but with listening. The air moved across them, and the surface shivered in response, reflecting its motion, mirroring its calm. The world had discovered echo. Every ripple created a twin. Every movement returned. Nothing was lost, only passed along, transformed, remembered. The dark deepened where the water settled. Not in fear, but in comfort, like a blanket tucking itself in. It stayed close, cool, and steady, so the light could drift freely above. Together they created color again. But now it was moving color, living color. Soft blues hummed under silver, deep grays breathed in rhythm with gold, and at the edges, the faintest trace of green began to whisper. Not from plants, there were none yet, but from balance. Green was the color of stillness learning to breathe, and so the water kept dreaming. It flowed and folded, spilled and returned, filling silence with the sound of soft repetition. You could have stood there forever, if standing existed yet, and never seen an end to it. Just ripples becoming ripples, forever learning what it means to move and rest at the same time. The air learned from that rhythm. It stopped wandering aimlessly and began to follow the flow. It traced the curves, pushed the ripples, lifted the mist, and in doing so it found joy. For the first time, the world had laughter, not loud, not sharp, just a soft exhale between ripples, a gentle shimmer that rose and fell with the breeze. The silence smiled. You could feel it, not see it, and let the moment stretch. Because even silence knows that sometimes the most peaceful thing in the world is watching movement find its rhythm. The water sang quietly through its waves, each sound a reminder that stillness doesn't mean stopping, it means knowing when to rest. And maybe that's why every ocean today hums when the wind passes over it, why every raindrop sighs when it lands, why every stream seems to remember something older than sound. They all come from that first pool, that first dream, that first sigh that became movement. And you, Johnny, are made of that same motion. Your breath, that slow tide rising and falling, is just the ocean remembering how to exist inside you. So breathe. Let the rhythm return. Let it flow where it wants. No need to hold anything. Everything that moves will find its stillness again. And when you close your eyes, you'll hear it. The world's oldest lullaby sung in the voice of water. I am movement that rests. I am rest that moves. And you are part of both, so drift now. Let the tide inside your chest rise and fall. The dark will stay near, the air will hum softly above. And the silence, impatient as ever, will hold you until you forget you were ever separate from it. Everything is still becoming, and everything is already whole. The dream of water never ended. It just learned to breathe through you. The world was finally breathing. Air moved. Water flowed. Silence watched. And the light, always curious, drifted lower, closer to the surface of the water that shimmered softly beneath the wind. For the longest time, light had wandered without a mirror. It had touched things, but nothing had looked back. But now, something waited below, something smooth, something calm enough to listen. The light leaned closer, and the water lifted its surface in welcome. They didn't touch. Not really. They only saw each other, and in that gaze the world discovered reflection. It was quiet at first, just a faint shimmer, like a thought forming in the corner of your mind. But that shimmer grew when the light trembled, realizing for the first time that it could be seen. The water rippled in response, sending soft waves of gold and silver outward, each one carrying a different shade of silence. Above them, the air paused, still enough for the shimmer to hold. And in that stillness, the first sky began to appear. Not a ceiling, not a border, just a vast reflection, a mirror made of calm. The light scattered softly across it, breaking into endless tones of blue. Not the bright blue we know now, but something gentler. The kind of color you only see when your eyes are almost closed, when sleep has already begun to blur the edges of sight. That blue spread slowly, curling through the air, weaving with the mist that had once been water, painting the space above with a tenderness the world had never known. The water looked up, and for the first time it saw itself in another form. The sky, a twin but lighter, a version of itself learning to drift instead of fall. The two were bound by reflection. Whatever one did, the other echoed softly. Waves below became clouds above. Light here became warmth there. And the dark between them became distance, not separation, but space for breath. The silence was pleased. It had built the world to hold stillness, but now stillness had learned to move without breaking. The wind wandered higher, carrying threads of mist upward. Those threads coiled and drifted, turning themselves into clouds, soft thoughts forming in the air. The first clouds weren't heavy. They didn't promise rain. They were simply wondering. They shifted endlessly, folding and opening like dreams trying to remember their own shapes. They carried whispers of light through them, gold that sighed, silver that glowed faintly in the hush, and below them the water answered with ripples, each one sending its reflection up to meet the drifting light. That exchange became rhythm, a slow, steady back and forth, water to sky, sky to water, and with rhythm came time. Not the kind you can count, but the kind that breathes through moments. Soft, endless repetition. The same way your chest rises and falls when you're half asleep. Each breath a reminder that you're still here, that being is enough. The world began to hum with that rhythm. Everything it touched began to move in time with it. The air learned gentleness. The light learned patience. And the water learned memory, because reflection is memory in motion, a way of remembering without holding. Each shimmer that passed across the water's skin was a moment that came, glowed and was gone, but not lost. It had simply become the color of the sky. That's what blue really is. Water's memory of light. It stretched across the world now, soft and endless, a cradle made of breath. The air moved through it slowly, careful not to disturb its calm. The clouds drifted in no hurry, their edges dissolving into brightness and shadow. Everything was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that breathes. The silence didn't need to hold the world anymore. The world had learned to hold itself. Light would rise. Water would shimmer. The air would hum. And between them, a balance so fragile and perfect you could almost miss it if you blinked. Sometimes the light would bend low, touching the water so gently that it became impossible to tell where the reflection ended and the sky began. Those moments were precious, not because they changed anything, but because they didn't need to. They were pauses made visible. That's what the horizon really was. A pause that forgot to stop. It stretched across the world, soft as a sigh, endless as thought. And even now, every time you look at it, you're seeing that same pause. The world's first breath. Still resting between reflection and air, the wind returned, brushing through the clouds, sending them wandering again. Their shadows rippled across the water, their reflections chasing them like memories trying to keep up. And the light followed all of it, content just to exist between them, touching everything, owning nothing. The day, if it could be called that, unfolded slowly, more dream than time. And when the light finally dimmed, the sky didn't vanish. It only turned inward. The reflection deepened. The blue sank into indigo. The gold melted into sleep. And the water below held the last shimmer of light like a secret it promised to keep. That's how the first night was born. Not as an ending, but as a reflection turned inward, a mirror closing its eyes to rest. The air grew still again, but it wasn't the same stillness anymore. It carried memory now. You could feel it in the way it sighed, softly, evenly, like someone remembering a song without needing the words. And the world, wrapped in that calm, slept, not because it was tired, but because it finally could. It had learned to reflect, to echo, to breathe between becoming and being. And so the sky and the water, forever twins, forever opposites, rested in each other's gaze, content in their shared stillness, unrushed, unbroken. That's the secret of peace. Jani's, it isn't found above or below. It's in the space between reflection and silence, between breath and rest, between seeing and being seen. You've been there before. You're there now. Every time you close your eyes, you return to that first horizon. The one made of light remembering water and water remembering light. So let it hold you. Let the air cool softly against your skin. Let your thoughts drift like clouds across a calm surface. Don't chase them. Don't catch them. They're just reflections. Moments of yourself passing through stillness. You are both the water and the sky, the reflection and the light. You are the world remembering its first dream. So breathe. Slowly. Let the horizon fade behind your eyelids. It's still there, quiet, endless, patient, waiting for you to fall gently back into it. Sleep now. The world is still reflecting. And somewhere far beneath the hush, the silence is smiling. The world didn't notice when evening truly arrived. It slipped in quietly, the way silence returns after a soft laugh. The light that had been floating across the water sank lower, stretching itself thin until it became nothing more than a hush of color fading through the air. Blue melted into violet. Violet sank into gray. And gray folded itself into something darker, something gentle enough to rest inside. The sky breathed out. You could almost hear it. A long, slow exhale that pulled the warmth out of the day and left behind a faint, cool hum. The water below caught that breath and held it close. Ripples stilled. The surface smoothed itself until it became a single quiet thought. For the first time, darkness wasn't emptiness. It was texture, soft, layered, full of unseen movement. You could feel it settle like velvet against the world's skin. Somewhere within that darkness, the light that had once wandered began to remember itself. It wasn't gone, only folded. Tiny shreds of it drifted upward, clinging to the air like dust suspended in a dream. Each shred found another, and together they began to hum, faint, almost shy. The hum rose higher, turning into the smallest glimmer. And that glimmer stayed. It didn't fall back into the sea or vanish into shadow. It lingered, a single spark blinking softly in the new night. The world opened its eyes just enough to see it. A point of light. Still. Small. Certain. And with that, the sky learned to glow. Not bright, not loud. Just the kind of glow you feel rather than see. A whisper of warmth stretched thin across distance. One spark became two. Two became four. Then a slow scattering, as if the night had remembered how to breathe light back into itself. Stars. But they weren't stories yet. They weren't names or shapes. They were simply echoes of the first reflection, bits of water's memory hanging above instead of below. The sky was finally returning the favor. Below, the ocean shimmered faintly, the stars caught in its surface. Every ripple held a tiny piece of the heavens, trembling but never breaking. It was hard to tell where the reflection ended and the real began, and maybe that was the point. Maybe the night was teaching the world that mirrors can face both ways. The air cooled. It carried that same calm rhythm the water once taught it, the slow inhale and exhale of something too vast to rush. Each breath brushed across the sleeping surface of the sea, and the stars trembled in answer, as though the whole sky had become one enormous heartbeat. The world didn't know what it was waiting for anymore. It wasn't waiting to form mountains or rivers or trees. It wasn't waiting for sound or meaning. It had found something softer, the comfort of stillness that hums. Now and then a faint shimmer of light would fall, a piece of starlight that had wandered too far. When it touched the water, it sank slowly, leaving a trail of brightness behind, a reminder that falling isn't always the same as ending. The water kept those fallen sparks safe, tucking them beneath its calm surface. If you looked close enough, and the world sometimes did, you could see them still glowing down there, gentle lanterns beneath a sea of dreams. Above and below, light continued to wander. Not in straight lines, not toward purpose, just drifting, a night like thought before sleep. That's how eternity feels when it's new. Not endless, just uncounted. Moments stretching, overlapping, each one dissolving softly into the next. The silence watched all of it with quiet approval. It had learned that it didn't need to keep things still anymore. Stillness had learned to sustain itself. Every ripple was followed by calm, every shimmer by darkness. Every beginning by a pause long enough to rest inside. Sometimes when the stars blinked, you could almost hear them whisper. Tiny sparks remembering the warmth of the world that first created them. They hummed to each other, not words, not songs, just shared knowing. We are light resting. And that hum filled the night. It moved through the air, through the water, through the soft edge of the world's half-formed dreams. It became the lullaby the earth still hears when it sleeps, the sound of distance remembering touch. The stars drifted in patterns that no one named. They weren't constellations yet, just accidents of glow. But every now and then 2 lights would pass close, and for a brief instant their shine would double. A single brighter breath. That brightness didn't last, but the memory of it lingered, like the warmth that stays on your skin long after the sun has gone. Night carried those moments carefully, stitching them into its endless fabric. That's why darkness never feels truly empty. It's woven with the light that came before it and the promise that more will follow. Down below, the water sighed. The reflection rippled gently and the stars swayed as if rocked by a cradle. The world was asleep now. Not the heavy sleep of forgetting, but the soft kind where everything drifts just enough to begin dreaming. And in that dream, the sky and the sea continued their quiet conversation. Each star a word, each ripple a reply. Endless, slow, soothing. You can still hear them if you listen closely. The sound of the first night learning to glow. The world whispering itself to sleep, one reflection at a time. The stars had settled. Their glow wasn't sharp anymore. It had softened into the kind of light that doesn't want to wake anyone. The world lay between them, breathing slow and even. A heartbeat stretched across water and air. Everything was still, but it wasn't empty. Inside that stillness, something gentle began to move, the way warmth moves beneath your skin when you're just about to sleep. The world was dreaming. It dreamed in colors that didn't yet have names. Soft gold like memory, pale blue like breath, a gray so calm it felt like silence made visible. Those colors drifted through the darkness, blending and unblending, curling through the sky like thoughts trying themselves on. The air carried them, folding them around the horizon until the whole night seemed to shimmer from the inside. It wasn't light exactly, just awareness, a quiet kind of seeing that belonged only to sleep. The world dreamed of what it had been before stillness. It dreamed of the first shimmer on the water, the soundless hum of warmth meeting cold. It dreamed of that first reflection, of the moment the sky realized it existed because something else had looked back, and the dream smiled to itself, content with remembering. Sometimes the dream deepened. The sea in its sleep imagined shapes moving beneath its surface. Not creatures, not shadows, just the idea of movement, a pulse within the calm. Currents began to form, slow spirals that traced the memory of light through the deep. Every swirl was a breath the ocean had been holding since the beginning. Now it let them go, one by one, each exhale turning into a ripple that brushed the underside of the night. Above, the stars listened. They didn't blink now. They glowed steadily, like eyes half closed in thought. They were the keepers of the dream, watching over every motion below but never interfering. The sky had learned patience. It understood that even dreams need silence to unfold. Somewhere between the sea and the sky, the air sighed. That sigh drifted through everything, through water, through light, through the soft hum of time itself. It was a soundless sound, the kind that only hearts in rest can hear, and when it passed, the whole world shivered. Not in fear, but in recognition, the world was dreaming of becoming. It wasn't rushing toward form. It was savoring the space before form. The gentle uncertainty that lets everything be possible. There were no boundaries yet, no names, no directions. Only the rhythm of being, steady and endless, like the pulse that runs through quiet music. Even silence began to remember movement. It rippled faintly at the edges, brushing against itself. And where it touched, tiny flickers of light appeared. So small you could only feel them, not see them. They were the first hints of something new. Ideas of warmth curling out of rest. The night held them carefully. It didn't let them rise, not yet. It kept them close, cradled beneath layers of calm. Because even beginnings need time to dream before they can wake. You could almost hear the world murmuring to itself. Soft phrases, no words, just comfort. Every sound a slow unfolding. Every moment a long inhale that never quite ended. And beneath it all, the sea began to hum again. That same low note it had carried since the first shimmer of light. It moved through the deep, through memory, through everything that had ever been still. It was the sound of time learning to turn over in its sleep. The stars answered with their own faint vibration. They sent threads of glow downward, not beams but whispers, tracing the lines of the waves sliding along the air, weaving connection through the spaces that separated everything and nothing. Where those threads touched the water, the ocean brightened. Just a little. Enough to remind the world that warmth still existed even in the quiet. The dream thickened. The colors deepened. Dark blue became velvet. Silver folded into pearl. Everything blended, nothing ended, and in that blending something small and patient took shape. Not matter, not yet. Just intention. The quiet wish to exist. It drifted through the darkness like a heartbeat in search of sound. Each pulse reached a little farther, testing the edge of silence. And silence kind as always made space for it. That's how the first thoughts began. Not minds, not voices, just patterns. Soft circles of awareness looping through the calm like ripples chasing themselves for the joy of movement. The dream watched its own reflection. Curious. It didn't know where it began or ended, but it didn't need to. It only needed to keep breathing, and it did. Slow, deep, endless. The breath of the world asleep inside itself. When you close your eyes and the darkness starts to glow from within, that's the same breath you're feeling. The old rhythm. The dream beneath the quiet. It waits there. Always. In the pause before you drift off, in the warmth behind your ribs, in the soft hum between one heartbeat and the next. That's the memory of the first night. The world's still dreaming itself whole, so let it carry you too. Let the calm spread through you as it did through water and sky and silence. Let yourself dissolve into the rhythm that has no end, the one that hums softly beneath everything. Because the dream is still happening, Janny. The world never truly woke. It only learned to keep dreaming with its eyes open. The night had been whole for a long while. Everything inside it moved the way breath moves through a sleeping chest, slow, quiet, circular. The stars still hung where they had first learned to rest, and the sea kept its soft hum steady beneath them. No one was keeping time. Time itself had forgotten to count. Then, somewhere at the edge of that calm, something subtle changed. Not a sound, not a color, just a feeling. The darkness began to thin the way fog does when a new idea wanders through it. The dream didn't end. It only lightened around the edges. It started deep in the water, far below the last ripple. A thread of warmth uncurled there, faint but persistent. It rose through the layers of stillness, carrying the memory of the first light that had ever touched the sea. As it moved upward, the water sighed and turned its surface toward it. The air felt it next. The faintest hint of warmth brushed through. Not enough to stir a breeze, only enough to remind the air that motion still existed. It stretched quietly, the way you stretch before you open your eyes, and the stars, sensing that stretch, dimmed just a little to make room. No one rushed. Even change was gentle here. The sky didn't brighten so much as remember brightness, the way you remember a voice by the feeling it left in your chest. Gradually the color began to return. First a soft gray like the underside of a whisper, then a diluted blue, hesitant, unsure whether to stay. The world seemed to breathe that color in and out, testing its weight. Each breath left a little more light behind. The horizon, if you could call it that, woke next. It had been the line between reflection and sky for as long as the world had been dreaming. Now it pulsed faintly, shimmering like a thought almost ready to form words. It gathered the last darkness into itself, softened it, and turned it gold. That gold didn't spread in a rush. It seeped. It slid along the surface of the sea, brushed the bellies of the lowest clouds, and curved upward until the whole sky began to glow from within. It was as if the dream was exhaling light. Not a new light, just the same one returning home. The stars didn't vanish. They drifted backward, letting the brighter warmth take their place. You could still see them if you looked closely, tiny traces of calm woven into the growing day. They would wait there until night remembered them again. The water glittered softly, not awake yet, just aware. Its surface caught the first real reflection of morning and sent it rippling outward in quiet circles. Each circle faded slower than the one before it, as though the world wanted to hold on to this moment of in-between. And maybe it did. The dream had been kind, but even dreams have to breathe out eventually. So the world didn't wake all at once. It stirred. It stretched. It blinked once through the haze of color, and let the thought of morning settle gently on its surface. The air warmed by degrees. You could feel it sighing through the distance, uncoiling the cool hush of night. That sigh became breeze. That breeze became touch. And touch became the first soft sound of the day, the quiet rustle of light against air. If you listened, you could hear the rhythm beneath it. The same old heartbeat, steady and unbroken, just moving in a lighter tone. The hum of the world didn't change. Only the key shifted. Night's lullaby turned into dawn's hum. The sky wasn't blue yet. It was the color of a promise, half seen, half felt. Every moment of stillness that had ever existed shimmered inside it, and the horizon, proud of its reflection, smiled wider. Light reached farther. It touched the tallest ripples, the highest threads of mist, and for a brief instant everything glowed evenly. Water, air, light, memory, all the same brightness. That was the first dawn, the quiet kind that doesn't chase the dark away but carries it gently into the day. The world felt lighter now. It had dreamed itself into motion. It had remembered that stillness could also rise. So it kept breathing, in, out, each breath filling with warmth, each exhale leaving a faint shimmer of gold behind. And if you were there, if you could somehow stand inside that first soft morning, you would have seen the reflection and the sky meet again. No sound, no edge, just the world looking at itself, half awake, half dreaming, glowing quietly from within. The dream hadn't ended. It had simply changed color. The light kept growing, but slowly, as though it were shy of its own reflection. It didn't flood the world. It folded over it layer by layer, like warmth being remembered instead of born. Every surface it touched seemed to hesitate. Not afraid, just careful. The way you might move through a familiar room in the early morning, not wanting to disturb the quiet that's still asleep there. The sea caught that light first. It spread it across itself like a secret it had been saving. Each ripple became a small horizon, curving gold for an instant before fading back into blue. The sky answered with its own slow shimmer, the color deepening as if the air were learning to hold brightness instead of reflecting it. And between the two, the distance softened again. You could no longer tell where the sea ended and the sky began. They had been separated only for the sake of breathing, and now they breathed together. The silence, still lingering at the edge of things, seemed pleased. It had taught the world what it came to teach. How to rest without vanishing, how to move without rushing, how to be bright without breaking. Light rose a little higher. It stretched itself thin across the air, filling every space between shadows until there were no more dark corners left to hide in. But even then it didn't erase the night. You could still feel traces of it. The cool softness clinging to the folds of the morning. The faint shimmer of stars that hadn't quite let go. Day and night existed together now, not in balance but in conversation. The air listened. It carried warmth gently, moving it through space like a hand smoothing the surface of calm water. That movement became breeze, and the breeze became rhythm again. The same rhythm that had once hummed through silence. Only lighter now. Not a pulse, but a hum made of brightness. The world glowed softly. It wasn't awake in the way we think of waking. It was aware. Every inch of sky, every curl of water, every stretch of horizon, all of it was seeing itself clearly for the first time. And yet, even in clarity, it refused to hurry. The light paused often. It lingered on the surface of the sea as if to remember where it came from. It slid over the air, kissed the mist that was still drifting lazily, and then settled into the curve of the horizon like a sigh finally finding a place to rest. If the night had been a breath held in, then this was the long, slow exhale after it. You could feel it in everything. The soft pull of air, the gentle expansion of space, the sense that the world had been waiting for this and yet didn't want it to arrive too soon. The water shimmered with reflections of light that had no source. They just existed. Tiny flashes that appeared and disappeared like the memory of stars turned liquid. Every ripple became a whisper. Every whisper a reminder that stillness and motion were the same thing seen from two different distances. The sky began to shift again. The pale gold at the horizon deepened into soft amber. The faint blue overhead settled into itself. Quiet but certain. It wasn't just sky anymore. It was space filled with light that had learned to stay. Time, if it could be called that, stretched. It didn't count seconds or hours. It just unfolded. Each movement of light across the sea was a sentence, each shadow a pause in its story. And somewhere in those pauses, the dream of the world continued to breathe. Because the truth was, it hadn't woken at all. It was still dreaming. Only now it dreamed in color instead of darkness, in shimmer instead of silence. The day drifted on. Not forward, not upward, just outward, filling every corner of what could be. It was the kind of day that didn't need purpose. It existed the way calm exists. Not as an event, but as a state of being. Sometimes, when the light caught itself at just the right angle, you could still see the faint reflection of the stars from the night before, as if the sky was carrying them within it. Tiny memories stitched into the brightness. That's how the first day carried the night. Not as a loss, but as a heartbeat under its surface. Every shimmer of sunlight still hummed with the memory of darkness. Every quiet breeze still whispered the rhythm of the sea. And the world, still slow, still half asleep, smiled without knowing it could. It had learned something that it would never forget. That even waking can be gentle, that light can arrive without noise. That existence doesn't have to begin with a spark. It can begin with a sigh. So the day stayed soft. It didn't blaze. It didn't demand. It simply shone the way peace shines. Not to be seen, but to be felt. The sea rocked beneath it. The sky floated above it, and somewhere in between, the quiet that had started everything rested again, content in the glow of its own dream. And maybe that's how it still is. Every morning just a memory of that first one. Light returning softly to a world that never stopped dreaming. So if your eyes grow heavy, if your breath slows, if the air around you hums the way distance hums before dawn, you can know that you're only following the same rhythm. The rhythm of the world that never really woke. The rhythm of the day that didn't want to wake, sleep, and let the light rest with you. The world didn't notice the moment the light began to fade. It was too calm for noticing. The sea was still breathing in long, slow waves, and the air still hummed the same low tone it had since the first shimmer rose. Everything was still exactly as it should be, and that meant it could finally start to change. The light softened first. Not dim, just turned quiet. It drew itself in a little, like someone wrapping a shawl tighter around their shoulders when the wind starts to whisper again. Shadows returned, not as darkness but as shape, the light's way of remembering where everything belonged. The world seemed to lean slightly, not toward night, but toward memory. The gold in the sky deepened, and the blue beneath it grew tender like the slow closing of eyes that had been open too long. The air cooled by a fraction, not enough to startle, just enough to remind the day that rest was coming. You could feel it if you listened. The rhythm that had once been still, then pulsed, then sang, was now turning inward again, not ending, returning. It was the same breath, the same long exhale that had started everything, coming full circle. The sea caught the reflection of that turning light. It glittered for a while, a field of liquid stars scattered across its surface. Every ripple seemed to hold a piece of the day, as if the water was collecting it carefully, storing it for when the world would dream again. The horizon blurred once more, sea and sky returning to their soft conversation, one folding into the other, like words whispered into sleep. Above, the air began to cool in slow spirals. The warmth didn't vanish. It just settled deeper, finding its place in the stillness. You could almost hear it. A sound like the faint echo of wings, though nothing was flying. It was only the wind remembering what motion felt like. Somewhere in that hush, the light began to blush. A soft tint of amber stretched across the world, warming every edge one last time before surrendering it. Mountains, if there were any yet, would have looked like thoughts half-formed, dark outlines against the tender glow. The sea shimmered back in farewell, 1,000 ripples flickering like candles in water. And the sky, oh, the sky. It began to stretch itself wider, as if making room for something else. Something softer, something that moved slower than light but deeper than sound. Evening wasn't a sudden arrival, it was an understanding. The light didn't fall, it folded. The air didn't darken, it deepened. Every color sank into another, until there was no single hue left to name, only a spectrum too gentle for language. The first shadow wasn't dark. It was calm. It crept in the way quiet does, not to cover but to comfort. And when it reached the sea, the water accepted it without protest, as if they had done this 1,000 times before. The light grew thin, stretched so softly across the sky that it seemed to breathe in and out like a living thing, remembering how to sleep. And perhaps it was. Perhaps the world itself was sighing, not from exhaustion, but from the joy of knowing it could finally rest again. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It had a pulse, the heartbeat of the day slowing down. You could feel it in the air, in the rhythm of the water, in the low hum that had been there since the first shimmer began. Then came the first hint of night. Not darkness, not yet. Just a cool whisper curling at the edge of the horizon. A question asked so softly it could have been mistaken for a breeze. The light hesitated, as if to listen one last time to the world it had spent all day waking. And then, with a gentleness that only the patient could understand, it began to retreat. Not away, but inward. It folded itself into the sky, into the clouds, into the sea that reflected it. Everywhere it had touched, it left warmth behind, a trace of gold, a shimmer of quiet gratitude. The world in return lowered its voice. Waves softened. The air slowed. Even the silence seemed to deepen, like the world was tucking itself in. That's how the first evening began. Not with an ending, but with a promise that every light deserves its rest, and every day carries the memory of night inside it. The glow that lingered on the horizon didn't fade completely. It stayed there, a thin thread between what was and what would be, a boundary so delicate it could only be crossed by breathing. And as the world inhaled again, the sky began to shimmer differently, not with light but with the memory of it. You could still feel the warmth even as the colors turned slow and blue. You could still see the shimmer, even when the sky began to lose its brightness. It was never gone, just resting deeper now, folded inside the quiet. And as the first stars began to stir, not shining yet, just thinking about it, the world fell perfectly still again. The same stillness it had known before everything began, the same silence that had once been everything. Only now it wasn't empty. It was full of the memory of light, the rhythm of time, and the peace of knowing that even the bright things must rest. The sea sighed softly. The air grew cool and kind, and somewhere between them the day closed its eyes and dreamed of morning once more. The world didn't fall asleep all at once. It drifted, the way thought fades when the body has already surrendered to rest. The last gold faded into gray, and the gray into blue so deep it seemed to hum. The horizon blurred again, a soft, endless line between everything that had been awake and everything that was ready to dream. The air was still warm, but it no longer reached outward. It folded back toward the sea, settling over it like a blanket laid with care. You could feel the change if you were still enough. The slow unwinding of the light, the faint stretch of the sky as it made room for the dark returning home. The first stars arrived quietly. They didn't shine right away. They appeared like distant thoughts, one here, another there, small pauses between the breath of the sky. And when they did begin to glow, it wasn't bright, it was familiar, as if the night had kept them safe all along and now it was time to let them out again. The world breathed them in. Each tiny light reflected on the sea. Each reflection wavered softly with the motion of the water, and the water whispered in return. That whisper carried through the air, not a sound but a feeling, like the memory of a voice that once sang you to sleep. The light of day had not disappeared. It had only gone deeper, hidden beneath the surface of the world, glowing faintly where no one could see it. That was the secret of the night. It wasn't the absence of light, but its gentlest form, light that no longer needed to be seen to be real. The wind rose, but softly, pulling at the edge of the sea and then letting go. It was the same rhythm as before, that quiet pulse beneath everything, only slower now, more tender, as if the world itself was sighing in its sleep. The sky above stretched wide and calm. The stars grew braver. They blinked awake in constellations no one had yet named. There were no stories for them yet, no heroes, no monsters, no hunters or hearts. Only dots of quiet flame scattered across the black. Each one was a memory, a flicker of the light that had once filled the day. The sea carried their reflection endlessly, turning them into ripples of silver that never broke. Between sky and water, the world became a mirror to itself, infinite, gentle, unaware of its own beauty. The silence deepened, not heavy, but kind. It moved through the air like soft hands smoothing a sheet. The stars seemed to listen to it. The sea seemed to breathe with it, and even the horizon, that long line between everything and nothing, seemed to rest its head for a while. There were no words yet. No names for the dark, no names for the light. Just the rhythm, that quiet, steady pulse that had started it all. It was the world's first lullaby, and it played everywhere, through every shadow and shimmer, through every breath of sea and sky. If you closed your eyes, you could almost feel it. The way silence doesn't end, it only changes shape. The way darkness isn't hollow, it's full of everything that light has forgotten how to say. And in that fullness, the world began to dream. Not a new dream, the same one it had always dreamed. The dream of beginning, the dream of warmth remembering how to move, the dream of shimmer curling at the edge of stillness, waiting for its turn to wake again. The sea rocked slowly beneath the stars. Each wave carried the world's breath out and back, without ever breaking the rhythm. The air above trembled gently, as if trying to remember whether it was supposed to rise or rest. Even the light that had hidden away seemed to hum softly inside the dark, a golden ember glowing behind the eyelids of the night. Time, if it still existed, had folded completely. There was no before, no after, only the long, slow drift of being. Everything moved together, the sky into the sea into silence, the silence into breath. And in that motion, everything was whole again. The stars shimmered like thoughts dissolving. The sea whispered like a voice too calm to wake. And far beneath both, the heartbeat that had begun in the quiet continued. Faint, slow, certain. It was the same pulse that had been there before light, before water, before sound. The same rhythm that had built the world and now lulled it back to rest. The darkness deepened, but it didn't hide anything. It revealed every shimmer beneath the surface, every secret curve of light, every forgotten echo of warmth. It all returned here. It all belonged to the night, and so the night held everything again. Not tightly, not like a keeper, but like someone remembering a song without needing to sing it. The stars kept breathing. The sea kept rocking. And the air, cool and endless, kept whispering its promise that nothing ever truly ends. It only sleeps. The world slept too. But somewhere deep inside that sleep, the first shimmer was already waiting. Not hurrying, not ready, just waiting. For warmth to remember how to move again, and when it did, the night would smile and the light would rise softly, and the dream would begin once more, just as it always had, just as it always would, so sleep now. Let the dark fold around you the way the sky folds around the sea. Let the quiet hum through you until you can't tell where your breath ends and the world's begins. Hear part of it, the rhythm, the rest, the long, slow turning of everything. And somewhere inside it, light is dreaming of you too. Sleep, and let the night remember you kindly. Hey, you're still here. That's nice. You made it all the way to the end. Through the shimmer, the silence, the long, slow breathing of the world. Maybe you didn't even notice the time passing. Maybe it just slipped by quietly, the way light does when it's tired of being seen. That's okay. You weren't meant to stay awake through it. You were meant to drift. Out there the night is still moving, soft, endless, unhurried. The sea's still breathing. The stars still remembering. and the air still hums the same low tune it's been singing since everything began. It doesn't need words, it just needs to be felt, and right now if you listen closely, you can feel it in yourself too. That same rhythm, the one that's older than stories, older than names, older than dreams themselves. It's been with you since the very first silence. So don't fight the drift. Don't try to stay awake. Let your thoughts fade like stars behind clouds. Let your breath slow until it matches the tide, and let the world fold around you the way night folds around light. Everything's okay now. The day has ended, the story has closed, and all that's left to do is rest. Somewhere out there, the same shimmer that started everything is still waiting. Quiet, patient, ready to rise again when you open your eyes, but for now, you don't need to do anything. You don't need to remember the story, or the light, or the way time used to move. You just need to breathe and drift and let the dark hold you the way it holds everything. Gently, endlessly, kindly. You've come full circle, dreamer. Back to where it all began. Back to the stillness that built the stars. The quiet that shaped the light. The silence that became you. So, close your eyes. Let the world hum without you for a while. Let yourself fade softly into its rhythm. And when you sleep, let the night remember you kindly, the way it remembers everything it loves. Good night. Sleep deeply. You're home now.